Hello, welcome to Gender Identities, Marginality, and Allyship. I'm Mads Whitmarsh-Jones.
And I'm Frances Portillo.
And we want to draw your attention to, there is a resource packet. Sorry, Frances, we're getting an echo. There's a resources packet. It is connected to the Google Calendar page, and it is accessible there. If you haven't had the chance to look at it, that's okay. But we are going to be referring to it a couple of times, so just know that that is there for you.
And it's my pleasure to introduce Mads. I'm really excited about this project. It is the first time that Mads and I have worked together, and it's the first time we've done this presentation for a real live audience. So glitches and all, we are ready to go. I first met Mads when they were doing a presentation for their other job, real job, whatever, with the libraries. And I just went, I want to work with this person. And I can tell you that, yes, we have a professional relationship, but the more we work together, the more we're friends. That's the best way to say it. Mads's pronouns are they and them. They identify as genderqueer. I already told you that they work in the library, and it will probably come as no surprise to you by the end of this that Mads has a BA in English and creative writing. And they told me to say this, but it's so true. They are happiest when they are in the creative process. And we have been creating this, and it has been a pleasure.
And sorry, I'm still learning Zoom to some degree, but it is my pleasure to introduce Frances Portillo of Portillo Consulting International. I first met Frances when I was giving a very short introduction to diversity for my day job at the library. It was 12 minutes and it was just jam-packed. And I was very nervous because the diversity professional that the library had hired was going to be attending my little lightning round. But after presenting, we had the chance to talk a little bit, and I felt that we hit it off immediately. Frances is a very knowledgeable, warm person who knows the power of getting a room to laugh. And now that I've worked with her and we've become friends, I can tell you that she would probably describe herself as a proud city dweller, a Latina woman of faith, and a Nana. We want to acknowledge that this is an uncomfortable topic for some people. And I'm so sorry, I'm getting an echo. It's an uncomfortable topic for some people. And we want this to be a safe space that gives you the opportunity to ask respectfully difficult questions or awkward questions that you otherwise would not have the opportunity to ask. All right, and I do also just want to put out there that while I am your culture broker for today, I am just one person and I don't speak for the entire community, but I'm your person on the inside for today, as it were.
And just for those of you who don't know the concept of culture broker, that is somebody, culture broker, cultural interpreter, is somebody who is from the inside of the culture and can start to understand, can help us navigate when we are not part of that culture. So Mads is really going to be speaking specifically from the insider's culture and what it is to feel, what it feels like, what it looks like to be inside the culture. And my job is to talk about how I, as an outsider, what I need from Mads to be able to be a good ally.
As a statement of support, Stonewall is a riot. While our colloquial use of riot can be good fun, I mean this literally. The Stonewall uprising was a violent riot in response to police raiding a New York City bar called the Stonewall Inn, and the key players in that riot included Black, Latinx, and transgender people, homeless people, and sex workers. Stonewall is often cited as the event that created the momentum necessary for queer activism in our country, and though I do also want to acknowledge the many protests that came before it, such as Compton's cafeteria. As a queer person myself, I owe the rights that I enjoy today to the women and people of color at Stonewall. June is Pride Month, so it's fitting that we're debuting this training now, but it would be unacceptable and irresponsible to allow this presentation to continue without mentioning Black Lives Matter and the ongoing racial injustice in our country. Black and brown folks are Stonewall's legacy, and our conversations on allyship will, I hope, offer broader context on how to be an ally for other marginalized communities, including people of color. We're going to begin with gender concepts, and the beginning of this presentation is going to be pretty information heavy, and I want to warn you about that. But I do feel it's important, and I'm going to tell you why. I believe that the best allyship is couched in empathy, and we can't be empathetic if we don't have access to concepts, especially concepts that aren't often talked about, as gender often falls under that category. So I'm going to be talking a lot. Please, as we said, utilize the chat box function. We're going to do our best to address your questions as you go, but we also do have some built-in pauses. So just buckle up, and hopefully we can get through some big ideas today. We're beginning with gender versus sex, aka what we're talking about, and specifically what we're not. A person's physical body does not determine their gender. If there is one gender concept that you come away from this knowing, I would have it be this. Sex refers to an individual's physical body and the biological characteristics that they have, like their genitalia, their reproductive organs, their hormones, their chromosomes, and other factors of their genetic makeup. The medical profession tends to narrow sex into two categories, into a binary, male or female, but that, quite frankly, doesn't give us the full picture of what biological sex is. Sex is a spectrum that is made up of unique combinations of physical traits, those that society says are male, female, or other, and a combination of traits that falls into other would result in someone who is intersex. That's a label, and we're going to talk more about labels later, I promise, but that is a word that some folks might adopt to refer to themselves if they fall into this category. One of the myths about intersex folks is that they're very rare. It is actually about as common to have a combination of sex traits that would deem you intersex as it is to have naturally occurring red hair. So this is very common, much more common than previously believed. Anything goes. There are men with vaginas. There are women with penises. There are people of all genders with both. There are women who grow facial hair and men who bear children and lactate. To reduce a person to their biological functions or their physical characteristics not only erases swaths of marginalized people, it also removes that person's humanity. So again, physical bodies do not determine a person's gender. It very well may be that it impacts a person's idea of their gender, but it isn't correlation. It doesn't determine it. We want to touch on the phrase AFAB and AMAB. It's very common, and unfortunately, it has an encoded meaning that draws conclusions about bodies. So I personally try to tend towards cultured female or cultured male because it still offers context of how a person was raised, how a person was cultured, but it begins to do that work of disentangling ideas of physical bodies from ideas of gender. Language is very powerful. That's going to be a theme of our presentation today. And we're going to do our first exercise. So I want all of you to think about the lessons that you learned growing up about gender, what you picked up from your classmates, your teachers, your parents, your extended families, and your friends. Consider especially what you learned non-verbally. What qualities got you or others teased or praised, for instance. We're going to be exploring these social ideas of gender in this exercise. And as a quick disclaimer, when I participated in this, when I was where you are now, there were words that came up that are considered non-professional insults. And with advance apologies to Francis, who will be personing the chat box, lean into that a little, because it turns out that our insults and some of our ruder words are really key in exposing patterns. So if, while doing so respectfully, I encourage you to lean into that just a little bit. And now I need to share a different part of my screen so that we can get started.
While you're doing that, I just want to share that Sarah said, being empowered with language is everything, especially in the area where it's always shifting, changing. So right in the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, so to begin, I would like folks to give me words that belong inside the quote unquote female box. So traits that are desirable or acceptable or expected for women. And Francis, if you could unmute to shout those out to me so that I can start filling in the box.
Okay, we have nurture, small, well-behaved, demure, quiet, pretty, mother, submissive, caring, kind, smart, sensitive, well-behaved,
These are excellent.
I was thinking naive.
Francis going for the jugular.
Needy.
I can't spell naive.
You got to get a new computer. Crazy.
Oh.
Bossy. Emotional. Dependent. Dramatic. Irrational. Hysterical. Bitchy. Loving.
Okay, so I think we're also getting a little bit into the words that are going to be outside of the female box. So we're doing inside the female box, and we're going to do outside of it later as well. So traits that are desirable versus traits that are considered undesirable. So you're on the right track though. You're doing very well. So let's I'm going to switch over, and we're going to do the words that belong inside the male box next. And same thing, traits that are desirable for men.
Tough. Strong. Stoic. Stern. Unmoved. Rock. Provider. Two people at the same time. Independent. Father. Logical. Disciplinarian. Educated. Smart. Sensible. Practical. Funny. Defender. Active. Leader. Sports bully. head of household, in charge, Laura wins for best use of language in this round. Do we have the prizes ready?
All right, I think we can now talk about words that belong outside of the female box. So again, this would be traits that would be considered undesirable for women or females.
Strong, independent, aggressive, successful,
Sorry, my computer is having a nice time with me. Sorry, strong, independent.
aggressive, confident, successful, controlling, assertive, loud, talkative, bossy, defiant, moody, competent, educated, leader, fat, hairy, H-A-I-R-Y, ugly. Whew. Sporty, nasty. That's contemporary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go ahead and add the, I'm going to move hysterical and bitchy outside the box as well, because I think oftentimes insults are really impactful with what is considered unacceptable. So
And we also got tomboy.
all right, we have come up with some great words here. Let's move on to what belongs outside the mailbox.
Soft, sensitive, fragile, effeminate, emotional, I feel like I might have missed some at the top if I can't scroll. Dramatic, empathetic, pensive. That's mine. Like they take too long to make decision. We want them to be snap decision makers.
I'm going to add one that I remember from when I did this exercise, which is
What is it?
A wuss
Oh,
or wimpy.
thoughtful, considered, considerate, considered, domestic, weak, sissy, crybaby, pansy, mama's boy.
All right, I think give it another minute or so to if there are any more.
Careful.
Excellent job, you all. I wish I could share a screen view that is both of them, but I haven't quite bent Zoom to my will on that front yet, maybe for tomorrow. But I'm going to head on back to our slide deck here. The thing about these gender boxes is that no one fits into them. This illustrates a couple of things. One is that patriarchal, toxic masculinity hurts everyone in the system. It is just as unreasonable to ask men to fit into the male gender role as it is to ask women to fit into the female gender role. No one can fit into these extremely narrow boxes. And because of that, it's unreasonable for us to expect ourselves or other people to fit into them. Now, a disclaimer about this that I want to be clear on is that this playground culture that we absorb, this is not gender itself. These are our culture's traditional gender roles, the rigid and unforgiving constructs that all of us butt up against in some way, shape, or form, either as children, as adults. Either way, this is society's traditional gender roles. And on that note,
so another way to see this is what gender isn't. It is not our physical biological traits. That is not what we're talking about when we talk about gender. And as you can see by the exercise we just did, clothes and other aesthetic choices do not really mark our gender. They certainly are marketed to us that way, but they are not necessarily our gender. Interests, hobbies, activities do not have a gender. We certainly have learned that there are, and I can remember my mom saying, girls don't run, and that kind of thing. It has nothing to do with my gender or my sexuality. My love of libraries got me the contract to work with the library that led me to meet Mads, and we are constantly bringing up books. And in one kind in particular, I have an extensive collection of children's books for different things. I do one on ethnic identity in children's books, and I really think that children's books are wasted on children because we can learn so much from children's books. So we have a few listed here that we both have in our collections, and and Mads said, you have to share the story about your grandson, because I am a Nana. It only took us a half an hour before I would tell a story about my grandson. But my grandson, Stephen, I was telling him one day that somehow my husband and I just on a whim both got each other bracelets, and his was a beautiful leather tooled one and mine was all these fancy sparkly things. And I said, Stephen, look, Nana got Papa a bracelet and Papa got Stephen a bracelet. And Stephen goes, yeah, Papa's is plain and Nana's is sparkly. And I said, well, Stephen, which one do you like? And he's looking at both of them and he goes, I like the sparkly. Great. Goes to daycare. Flash forward a couple of months and he says, I can't wear that bracelet, Nana. Boys don't wear sparkles. My heart was heavy. The next thing he said, almost without skipping a beat, but I can wear sparkles on my face. And I thought, where did that come from? Well, before he had heard this new gender defining thing, we had taken him to get his face painted, and he loves dinosaurs, and he put the dinosaur on his face, and he said, I want sparkles on my dinosaur. So I think Stephen's thinking was that he had already in his identity decided that sparkles were okay for him on his face. Then he gets this new information, and what he decides is, oh, but I've already established this other rule that on my face it's okay. So it's kind of a happy, sad story in that he's buying into it, but he's also checking it out to see how real that is for him.
Yes, what struck me about that story the first time that I heard it, am I unmuted? Sorry. What struck me about that story the first time I heard it was that he was coming up against these gender roles and encountering them for the first time, and Francis got to see that happening in real time. And at the same time, he's also already subverting them in a way that he is comfortable with, because he likes sparkles, darn it, and he's going to have them in his face paint. And I think that's very telling about how we absorb these notions of gender roles. Now that we've talked about what gender isn't, we're going to talk about what it is. Gender is how any individual feels about themselves in the context of their culture and of their society. These feelings give rise to one's gender identity, and some people, but not all, assign a name or a label to their gender experience. There are things that may impact an individual's gender experience, but they don't necessarily have to. But these things include the person's physical body, the person's social notions of gender or gender roles. If there is a part of a gender role that is very important to someone or that they identify with, that is fine. If it's key to who they are, that's part of who they are. There's also something to be said for performative gender, which goes back to the notion of there being certain clothes that communicate something about identity. One of my favorite phrases is, clothes don't have gender, I do. But there is still, we operate within our social context. So there is a place for people who feel they communicate something about who they are with their outward appearance. It just doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is thinking the same way. If you're curious about more notions of performative gender, Judith Butler coined that phrase, and you can read material from her.
Is the activity, am I right? Am I on the right place?
Yes.
Yay! Okay, so if you can see my screen, you had two handouts. I guess I should see my screen too so I can see it. You have two handouts. Where am I? Oh, there I am. So you have one that is a unicorn, speaking of animals and relationship to animals. And you have one that's a relationship to food. It's the genderbread person. And so both of these are activities that you could be doing right now. We thought it would be like color along with us. We said that you may want to have bring coloring utensils with you. But again, just your idea of where you fit on this. So both of these have the credit on the page, but I also just want to point out that Mads really did redo the genderbread person, and again, specifically for this group, has looked at it and said, how do we make this more accessible and more understanding? So I'm going to explain the genderbread person, and then as you see, the gender unicorn will be kind of self-explanatory after that. So the genderbread person, you can see the genderbread person there, and it talks about what's your identity? Who do you like? What about this body that you have, and how do you express it? And then down at the bottom, if you printed it out in color, you'll see that there is a spectrum there for your gender identity, and it would be from pink to blue, how you feel about your gender expression and your body. And so you think about where you fit on those. And then that next sentence, gender identity does not have to match expression, and neither of them have to match my body. It's possible that they do, but that does not mean there's a right answer. You don't have to match. And then the last part there is my gender identity and my gender expression do not determine who I like. So we all have a natural way that we're attracted to people. And this is going to tell you, or it gives you a chance to think about, Who do I like? Who am I attracted to? What kind of friends do I have? I've often asked people, just open up your phone to all of your people.
Context.
Your what?
Context.
Your contacts. I knew there was a more 21st century word. Your contacts. And who do you gravitate towards? It tells you a lot about the people you're interested in. So we're going to keep on talking, but we wanted to show you these. And if you want to be doing this at the same time, you're welcome to do that.
Yes, while you color or think about coloring, I'm going to talk about the gender spectrum. And we have a couple of models here. This might really help you to further understand the handouts. So if you want to wait until after this slide, that's fine too. The first model of the gender spectrum is a slider, where we've got the female gender on the one end and the male on the other, and this nice gradient in between. Using myself as an example, I would fall in this area somewhere here. Hopefully you can see my mouse. In this nice blurple spot, blue-purple. And using Frances as an example, she would be over here somewhere. And I do want to put out here that there's nothing wrong with identifying with a binary gender. It's completely fine and welcome to identify as a binary gender. It's just that we want to have visuals that help represent that it's not just those two. We've also got this other nice range in the middle. Some people like the slider. Some people think that it's a little bit simple. So for those folks, we have the grid. And again, using myself as an example, I would be somewhere over here in this nice highlighter yellow color. And Frances would be somewhere down here in this nice pink corner over here. So there are multiple ways to envision the gender spectrum, and these are just a couple of ways of visualizing that. While you keep working on your sheet, I am just going to talk a little bit about the transgender experience and transgender as an umbrella term. So any time that a person's gender that they feel, their gender identity and the gender they were cultured or raised as doesn't match, that person could be said to be transgender. So that can be a wide range of people. Not everybody will choose to adopt this label, but it does have a function of a range of experiences within transness. In contrast, someone who is raised or cultured in the gender they do identify with would be said to be cisgender. And Frances actually has a really excellent mnemonic, I can't say this word, mnemonic device for cis.
Well, it came up because I heard this cisgender and I thought, okay, that's me. That's who I am. And I thought, I don't know where cis came from. And, you know, a lot of times it means something. The letters mean something. So I thought, does it mean comfortable in skin? And so that's what I started deciding was cis was comfortable in skin. And Mad's response to that was?
That I had never heard that before, but honestly, I found it really delightful because it gets to the core of what cis is, and it's sort of an inaccessible term, especially for folks who haven't interfaced with the concept before. So I think it serves perfectly well. If you are curious about the etymology of cisgender, that is in the resources packet in the glossary as well. It's Latin, I believe. Some more food for thought while you color, just some non-binary concepts to introduce you to. You don't have to grok these just to have floating around while you work. People who feel that they don't have a gender experience or that gender is foreign could be said to be agender. Gender fluid is a term for someone who has a fluctuating gender identity, that at different times they feel differently about their gender experience. And then demi-genders are similar to gender fluid, but I like to think about it like a tetherball, if you remember tetherball from recess. So the pole is planted in a spot that is fixed, but the ball sort of moves. So For me, my tetherball pole would be planted in that area that's more towards the blue, but that ball sometimes swings really far blue and sometimes it swings more purple and maybe even a little bit into the pink. So this idea of dynamic genders is what demigender is, and we're going to hear a little bit more about that from this. All right, and one of the things that I want to call back to in this video is that I really love her use of the spectrum, very similar to the one that we had posted earlier, and specifically that she pointed out that where she feels she is, moves around, and I think that's just a very good demonstration of dynamic genders.
So when Mads and I were doing the research on this, we wanted to see what other cultures did and how the gender spectrum was identified in different cultures. And you may also, by the way, see me look at Mads every once in a while because I'm still dealing with vocabulary. And every once in a while I go, is that the way to say it? And again, because Mads is a great culture broker and also has some trust that I really want to be an ally, we've had some really interesting conversations. We were both touched when we read this, and we felt that we should just see it in its full spirit. Spirit, because it's right there. So this is in explaining the pan-Indigenous term two-spirit. Two-spirit is used to denote people who traditionally have special roles within our communities, our cultures, and our ceremonial life. Our people were strong and beautiful in our traditional understanding of life, and that we all have different gifts. Two-spirit indicates an ability to see the world from both male and female perspectives and to bridge the world of male and female. The concept of balance is important in our traditional views, and balance can be between people or groups or within a particular person. Two-spirit expresses the concept of balance within a person. And this made me think of all of the cultural identities that I have and going back and asking myself, what are the messages that I got growing up in my age group, in my community, in my professional life? What are all the cultural comments, the cultural guidelines that I got in describing non-binary genders? So I'd just like you all to take a second and just think about what were the messages that you've gotten or continue to get based on your own cultural experiences.
And now we want to encourage you, if you want to turn your camera on and hold up your coloring sheet, if you did do a coloring sheet, or if you want to take a picture of it and send it to us later, or put in chat, was there something that you learned about yourself, something that surprised you? And also, if you had a preference between the slider or the grid model of the gender spectrum. So please feel free to comment or chat.
Thanks, Tracy. Do you want to say something about yours?
Not really, not right now. This is the first time I've done this exercise, but
Great.
I would share. The heart is green, by the way. I know that's not on the little color key, but I got to be a rebel somewhere, right?
And we're asking you your perception, so there's no wrong answer. That is how you see yourself. Anybody else? We hope you'll send us some of these so that we can maybe use them or Sarah said, I really like the grid. So often when we try to find visuals to teach this material, gender visuals don't have space for agender folks, and this identity is vital to the conversation. Thank you.
All right, I promised that we would get to labels, and we have arrived. Love them or hate them. Labels oftentimes are complicated and they bring up really strong emotions. There are people who want to adopt labels for themselves, these special words that help them express how they feel and what their experience is. And then there's others that want to reject them, insisting that they're just themselves and that that is enough. Both views of this are valid. I personally really enjoy labels, and I'm going to use mine as an example in this slide. So some of mine are, I'm genderqueer. I like the notion that I have gender and I have queered it, queer as a verb here. There is a less safe for work version of this term that includes a 4-letter swear beginning with F instead of queer. The idea to mess with gender and to take this social structure and take it apart and fuss with it in different ways. So that is one of the words that I like very much. I am also non-binary, so I experience gender, but it's not male and it's not female, it's something else. I am also demisexual. Demi, as we touched on before, meaning partial or half, and this is also in your handout. But what that means for me is that I don't experience physical attraction to people. So I'm on the asexuality spectrum or demisexual. I'm also panromantic, which means that aesthetically or as friends, I am equally drawn to all people. Anything goes. Words have power, and part of the reason that I am drawn to labels is that they have the ability to normalize experiences. I didn't know or think of myself as demisexual until I read a blog post that was someone who was demi talking about their experiences and what it meant to them. And I'm very fortunate in that I have never been made to feel like I am broken or a freak, but there are a lot of people in this community who either internally feel that or have been made to feel that way. And labels have a really powerful ability to assuage that feeling because, oh, I'm not broken, I'm just asexual. I'm not broken, I'm just demisexual. There's a word for it. So for me, I continually come back to labels because they have that normalizing power. But also, just a forewarning, because these are special words that we're using to try to talk about our own internal experiences, inevitably, different words are going to mean slightly different things to different people. So just a word of warning on that one. But I personally enjoy them very much.
And that word of warning comes with how we talk about people and what kinds of words we use. Would we really mean to hurt people? And we know that there are words that people have used or created, generally from outsiders to insiders, words that they really, really want to use with every intention of having a negative impact. And I think back to the N word and how I will never use that word. But somebody on the inside might say, but we can. And they reclaim the word to say, you have said it so many times negatively to me that I'm going to say it out loud and it's going to be my word. On the other hand, what we need to remember is that not everyone in that community agrees with that either. So maybe this group, one of the ways it's falling for me when I talk to my African-American friends is younger people tend to use the word, you hear it in the rap music, you hear it that they can call themselves that. Their parents are saying, I still don't want to use the word, I don't buy it, as an example. And again, that's a generalization, but that's been my experience. Well, the same thing happens with the reclamation of slurs here. And one of the things that I was thinking about is I have a lot of friends who, when we're talking about the words, they'll say, just call me queer. And I'm thinking, I don't really use that word and it makes me uncomfortable. So part of this, and a very strong part of this, is relationship. What is the relationship that you have with that person. So if Mads says to me, and I think we've established we are really close and have gotten closer because of this, if Mads said, you can call me queer, what I hear is that I get to call Mads that. It doesn't mean that I now can transfer that to every single person I know and know that that's accepted for everyone. And it also means that I may not do that in public. It may just be something that Mads and I say. If, and the bottom line down here, if you catch yourself wondering, you should probably not use it. And asking permission. And also, I was telling Mads about using a word that I thought was fine being coming out of my mouth. And one of my guy friends said, not from you. And I thought that he and I had a relationship more like Mads and I do. And rather than argue, I just said, thank you. Nice to know. Won't do it again. Anybody, just a quick little test here. Anybody know why the pink triangle, or where the pink triangle came from to connote gay culture, queer culture? I know one of you knows it. At least 2 or 3 of you know. There's too many people in here. Yes, Tracy. Just as there was the Star of David signified Jewish in the Nazi concentration camps, the pink star was used to identify someone who was not straight, anyone who had any part of that spectrum. Thank you. Sarah said, labels are important, in my opinion, for those of us who are not represented by words used in conventional language. Not having a language to describe yourself erases your identity. That's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. If a word doesn't exist, then that does not exist, that person or that concept. So I feel quite empowered by having labels, even if they are always incomplete. Nothing's perfect, but that doesn't mean you can find the empowerment in the imperfection of language. Also, it felt really empowering to hear someone else use demisexual aloud, Mads, in a public context. For me, that's been one of the most empowering labels. I think we're doing this right, Mads. This is great. But label implies a general applied term. We can identify without making it a label. Label tends to feel like a negative word in American language. In the one I'm going to do next, and now it's kind of like not a surprise, but some people can see it as a box that I can't get out of. I see my labels as my identity, and I see them as kind of a warm blanket that says, this makes me remember that I'm home.
Yes, a relationship with labels is, it can always be complicated, but thank you for bringing those up. I appreciate that.
Okay, and it looks like I missed a question from Indira. I don't see it here. Indira, do you want to say it, or do you want to retype it?
Well, I'll just repeat it as much as the best as I can. Just, it's about the term or the label queer. It's always been confusing to me, so I'd like to know more about it. I've heard people say that I'm queer and I just don't understand it. So I want to know more, like, because it seems kind of, when I read the definition, it seems very elusive and kind of broad. So.
Oh, sorry.
I just messed up. Sorry. 1 second.
Don't read that. It's not yet.
Hey. Okay.
The danger of having the space bar be temporarily unmute. We are going to get to talking about queer more as a word. And I do know, thank you to someone who privately chatted me, it can be a very uncomfortable word. For me, it is extremely empowering, and I will get to that in a moment. But thank you. I do respect that it is a difficult word for a lot of people. And to talk about, hold on, where do I talk about the queer umbrella?
And while you're looking for that, Judy just talked about being people of color, that there's also a limiting property to labels. And Judy, if you want to say more, and I do want to just acknowledge that labels that keep us inside or restrict us are dangerous. labels that help us understand who we are on all levels can be very positive. So Judy, did you want to say some more, or did we get to that?
Yeah, thank you for letting me just express a little more. And I think as a person who's not from this country and having endured with all this and now talking about gender, which I know is totally intersected, I hope that we were able, to identify ourselves. Yes, language is powerful because that's what it lets us know. It's a contract of what words mean, and it changes. But I still feel strongly about labels because for me, the word label just will make it a general term where if the meaning of the word is used and we understand what that word is used at this time, it can be taken by those who want to, but it doesn't necessarily put everybody in that category by default, if that's making sense.
Thank you. That's helpful. Yeah. I almost feel like we need a whole workshop on labels now, because this is big.
So
I am going to move on. We're going to have to speed up a little bit to try to get through everything. So I might breeze through some big concepts, but any conversation that involves language and labels needs to also include the acronym. There is no official acronym, and there are pros and cons to every iteration of it. I have a couple up here that you can look at in more detail, but this is also where I talk about the idea of the queer umbrella. So queer as a word is, for me, though it has been used as a slur and it has been weaponized against people in this community, part of what I like about it is the notion of taking that word and then making it a umbrella that shelters everybody who has an experience that is not cis heteronormative. So anyone who is gender expansive, anyone who is anything other than straight could be said to be queer. That's what I like about it, and I find a huge amount of catharsis and power in taking that word by the hilt instead of by the blade and then turning it into something else. You're absolutely right, Indira. It is sort of a squidgy word. It's a squidgy concept. It can embody a lot of things, but there's also one of the an old slogan is not gay as in happy, queer as in F you. And there is a certain amount of resistance that is built into that word as well. So I hope that answers your question, but we do need to clip along here to get through and talk about allyship. So gonna touch on gender dysphoria, misgendering, and congruence. So gender congruence is what happens when you have a feeling of harmony that comes from understanding yourself, understanding your gender, being recognized as your gender, and feeling that your body adequately matches. Being cisgender or cis, that experience is baked in. And that's all that we're trying to achieve when increasing gender congruence. Dysphoria is the opposite of that. Now, this is the definition from the DSM-5 of gender dysphoria. And if you were to magically be able to look at part of my medical record, that's what you would see. Want to give you a word of caution. This definition has improved by leaps and bounds over past iterations of it. And when accessing information that is about medical science as pertains to gender, please just have your critical thinking hats on. There is no place for agendas in good science, but medical science has been used against folks in the community historically and almost certainly will be again. So when you are interfacing with that kind of research, just please keep that in the back of your mind. And the other thing is that you don't have to experience dysphoria to be trans. There are plenty of folks who are trans who don't have this discomfort. So that is something to keep in mind as well. Transitioning is just a series of strategies to increase gender congruence. So physical strategies include hormone therapies, gender confirmation surgeries, and other procedures. I would strongly caution anyone from asking about someone's physical transition status, because oftentimes humans are curious creatures. It's natural. It's natural to wonder. But a lot of times it has more to do with trying to parse the cultural expectations that we've been indoctrinated with than it actually has to with the person that you're speaking with. And Frances actually has a story about that.
Yeah, well, I did it. And so my story, and some of you have been watching along, and I don't know if you noticed, but I finally got my hair cut. And my hairdresser, her name is Roxy, and Roxy is trans woman. And Roxy has a one-seater beauty shop called Little Shop of Hairs. If you come here, I'll give you the address. And at first, Roxy was my hairstylist. And as we got closer, Roxy and I got closer, and we shared stories of prejudice that had been put upon us. And so I'm feeling pretty comfortable with Roxy, and Roxy is washing my hair. And I said, so have you had the surgery? And Roxy stops washing my hair. And she says, Frances, did you know you're not supposed to ask people that? And I said, I'm sorry. No, I didn't know. And I guess I felt safe with you. So Roxy starts washing my hair a little slower because she's thinking, and she says, well, strangely, I want to tell you. I want to have this conversation with you. And she said, so why doesn't it bother me when you ask and it bothers me when other people ask? Well, I'd like for all of you to think about people who you are close enough to that you would share your biggest, deepest secrets. Because I think that's where Roxy and I are. And yesterday I was the first person that she did her hair since all of this has happened. And she said, just you today, just you. So we are close. And also by my making the mistake, I think we got closer, and I do have more information. And Roxy has become quite a powerful ally or a culture broker for me to become an ally because of the mistake. So we don't want to scare you off and say, just be careful what you say. It's more like understand that you will make mistakes. And when you are not the ally, but you're the person in the group, let's be gentle with people who didn't have all of the experiences we had to understand us.
There's also social transitioning steps that you can take. And unfortunately, I think I am going to have to move on because we do not have much time left, and I really want to give us the chance to dig into allyship concepts. So I'm going to breeze over a few concepts and going to get into some of the more meaty content here. So, oh, we do? Okay. Well, I just want to I want to try to get the most relevant and useful information to you. So the elephant in the room is, of course, gender neutral singular they. I highly recommend, there is a YouTube clip that we were going to use from a linguist. I personally think, does a wonderful job talking about gender neutral they. The idea here is that they used to be an accepted gender neutral singular pronoun before Victorian grammarians codified it as being only plural. And that language changes, it grows and changes, it's alive. And we also are starting to see codification. So that is something to keep in mind. But sorry, let me go ahead here. It also lives on in our colloquial language, the historic gender-neutral singular they. So if in a meeting room someone left a bag, we might say, oh, someone left their bag. I hope they come back for it. Through context, it's understood that we're talking about someone we don't know what their gender is. And that is an accepted form in colloquial speech. I do understand also that this is an extremely difficult switch to make. As Frances said, I have a degree in English. I know how hard it is to overcome these grammatical rules that we've been so heavily enforced in our education. So I get that it's hard, but it can go a long way to validating someone to practice using that word. So I also wanted to point out that now we do have a codified gender neutral honorific of mix. There's a variety of ways to pronounce it. I do like mix very much. And sorry, my computer is being nice to me here. Yes, so we finally have that, and that's exciting. In the age of face masks and telephone communication, enunciation is extremely important. So I encourage you to lean on the X if you use it, but it is there. And now we're finally going to get into.
Oh, well, I was just going to tell that one quick story about
yes.
you said mix, and then you said I like Mex better, and then I said wait a minute, that sounds like Mexican, and we kind of had a laugh about just how tricky language really is, and you have to be ready to play with it, and you have to be ready to say, how did that land in my stomach? Where are we going with this? And it's an evolving language, and probably 2 years from now, maybe we'll have a different chart to put up. Oh, my turn. So this is about intersectionality. And again, the foundational cultural piece that we'll be seeing, there are 14 different cultural categories that one has in their possession, in their being. And so your gender identity is only one of them. There are so many other identities that we have. And again, the first person that came to my mind is my friend Emily, who did not come out as trans or have the surgery until her late 50s. And so that adds an age culture to this too. And what was it like to be accepted in her new community? And she said, I had to get a divorce because my wife didn't want to be married to a woman. And so all of these things that she had to deal with older children. So all of that intersectionality between her age and her gender. The other one that Emily pointed out to me was that she also, this was socioeconomic. Emily's job was a place where she could get that surgery paid for in full. So class-wise, there are a lot of people who the intersectionality is that regardless of what they know and feel about themselves, they do not have access to proper health care, counseling, any of it. So just look at the ways that all of these different cultures and particularly marginalized cultures play into this.
I also wanted to talk for a moment about the development of these two visuals. Intersectionality as a concept is a really huge concept that is difficult to boil down into something easy to parse. But the very first things that I thought of as a visual learner are Venn diagrams and crossword puzzles. And I think that both of them nicely communicate that multiple marginalities not only interact, they impact each other. Also, just as a quick aside, my computer has decided that I am no longer allowed to hear anything. So if you are speaking, I won't be able to hear you. So I'm not ignoring you, I promise, but I'm going to have Francis let me know if someone's talking.
And I think you can hear it from my computer too. So I'll just put it as loud as I can when they talk.
Okay,
We should be okay.
It's one of those tech days. Now we come to the unfortunate truth of the situation, which is that being transgender is extremely dangerous. When I was first putting together the lightning round that I mentioned earlier and came across the quote, "More than 1 in 4 trans people has faced a bias-driven assault and rates are higher for trans women and trans people of color," it really gave me pause. Because in my library district that I work for, off the top of my head, there are 4 of us who are either trans or gender nonconforming who are out. And it is extremely sobering to think that based on statistics, at some point, one of us will face violence for who we are. We also don't have to look very far to see ways that that is systemic, with our current administration giving healthcare providers the right to refuse us based on who we are. That is the unfortunate truth of the situation.
Rhea Milton, Dominique Remy Fells, Tony McDade.
These are only some of the 14 transgender people who have died because of violent causes in this year alone. Based on that, 2020 is already slated to exceed last year's total of 26. And this doesn't take into account non-reported violence or suicides, which are unfortunately rampant in this culture, or in our culture. And we felt that it was important to honor these people, these trans people of color who recently have lost their lives. And because being trans is dangerous, we have to talk about outing. So if you are in a situation where you are asked to purposely misgender someone or use their old name, please do your best. Or if you are a mandatory reporter and you're talking with someone who you feel may be a victim or a survivor and you think they're about to disclose something to you, inform them that you're a mandatory reporter so that the power then goes back to the person in the situation so that they have control over whether an agency gets involved or not. And in general, do your best not to out LGBTQ folks, because it very well could be that there is a reason that they're not out to everyone. These are hard concepts, and we also have to talk about the fact that there's bias even within our own community. There are gatekeepers in every population. It just is a fact of life. Unfortunately, there are those who would say that bi people, there's rampant anti-bisexual bias in the gay community. There's people who would say that if you're non-binary, you're not trans enough. That is something that happens. And we also need to talk about trans exclusionary radical feminists, or TERFs. If you're on Twitter at all and you have heard anything about J.K. Rowling recently, then you already know a little bit of what I'm talking about, unfortunately. TERF rhetoric is that women are only women if they have vaginas, uteruses, and other biological markers that are traditionally considered female. This is an example of biological essentialism, and it erases women who have pre-existing conditions like infertility. It reduces women to their biological functions, which is dehumanizing, and it also completely ignores the natural variants and biological characteristics that we talked about earlier. A real-life example of biological essentialist rhetoric is the pink pussy hat of the women's marches of 2016 and 2017. It was a visual pun and a double entendre, one that in a literary sense I enjoyed deeply, but it still relied on this notion that women have vaginas. Hence the rise of the trans pride pussy hat. And frankly, if any of you know how to knit, can I please pay you? Because I want one really bad.
I think if you want to keep putting your chats in the chat room, that's great. We really want to get to that, the heart of the allyship, and I'm so glad we said 2 hours instead of an hour and a half. I also wanted to make sure that we all heard Judy Gates' recommendation of the film Disclosure. And this next piece, we're gonna go over it because we have to, but not a whole lot of time, because we think that we've included all of these next slides in there. If you have legal pieces, we are not attorneys. We do not play attorneys on television. So just so you see that they are here, you've got, again, not gonna really say anything about it. You have a copy of the EEOC document. You have a copy of the Oregon state law. You have a copy of Lane County College Policies. I want to stay with this one just for a second, because if you look at that second yellow highlighted, the core value of respect for diversity and a respectful, safe, and inclusive working and learning environment require cultural competency, diversity awareness among its employees. May we please give Lane Community College a round of applause for even giving us this venue to talk about this. That's the last
Yes,
one, right?
for that, thank you so much. And again, in the interest of time, we're going to move right along because this is hopefully the actionable part. So, we are all racist. I want you to sit with that notion. When I was told this recently, it made me deeply uncomfortable. It made me even angry. It made me want to be defensive. Luckily, I kept my mouth shut because if I hadn't, I would have promptly inserted my foot. But as I sat with it, I realized what this statement is really getting at, which is that nothing happens in a vacuum. And our culture is deeply racist and ableist and homophobic and transphobic, et cetera, et cetera. And all of us as people are products of that culture. And if we hope to become good allies, we must do the work of disentangling what we've been indoctrinated with from our true values. We must become anti-racist, anti all of the ists. And as I said, it's hard work. It's extremely hard work. It takes a commitment to examining our own thinking. It takes critical thinking. It takes a lot. It's hard, but it's worth it.
So we're starting, we're starting to hear a lot more about being an ally, and that means we have to move to action. This is not a name I get to call myself. I actually have to live it. I have to step into it. I have to be uncomfortable, and I have to be willing to make the mistakes that I make in order to learn a little bit more about it. I had a notion of a story here, didn't I? Oh, yes, I knew there was a story I wanted to tell. So I have to be willing to take those chances and to make it my piece. So Mad said, tell the story. So my husband, retired now, but he was a pipe fitter and he worked in the trades. And when he first met me, he had a lot of things. He was always verbal, but he had a lot of things he wanted to learn from me. And he came home one day and he said, a couple of guys were making fun of Latinos and I was getting really upset. And I said, did you tell them that your wife is Latina? And he looked at me and goes, no, was I supposed to? He gave the right answer. It isn't about me. It isn't that you have a friend who. What he said was, it offended me. I don't have to, I'm not speaking for anyone but me. And he said, it offended me. And I loved that his reaction, even to me, was I supposed to? Because it didn't occur to me to bring you into this conversation. That's being an ally. That's working it without having to get permission from anyone. It bothers me.
Which gets to the core of allyship, which is respect. And that's all well and good. But I want you to radicalize your idea of what respect is. And for that, I have a story as well. At my day job in the library, there for a time was a coffee shop that was inside the library itself. And one of the employees there and I grew very close. We had a very overlapping schedule. We saw each other a lot. And we became friends enough that we had each other's phone number to text sometimes. And after she misgendered me in front of someone that she was training, I texted her later to say, I am gender neutral. If you could please use neutral pronouns with me in referring to me. And she came back with, I don't believe in more than two genders. And she couched that in that she was a person of faith. And what struck me about it was that only a couple of days before, she had come to me to tell me how much she appreciated how much I was unafraid to be myself in terms of the clothes that I wore, because I tend to dress just a little bit left of strictly professional. But it would be the same thing as my saying to Francis, you tell me that you're a woman, but I know better than you, so I'm going to call you a man. That's what I mean when I say we need to radicalize our ideas of respect. I wasn't asking her to change her beliefs. She can believe whatever she wants, and that's fine. All I was asking was for her to use a word that I felt reflected who I was.
And what struck me about this story is that when Mads was sharing this with me, they said that the person, the woman, kept saying, well, because of my Christian beliefs. And I thought, this is so very dangerous, because Mads right from the beginning said, I speak for myself, I don't speak for all of my culture. And here's this woman speaking for all of the culture. I am a practicing Catholic, and I say that out loud because that is one of the labels that I identify with. It's mine, it's my blanket. And I was scared that what could have happened to Mads is to say, this person just invoked Christianity, therefore, all people who are Christians are anti-gay people, anti-me. And then Mads meets me and I say, oh yeah, when I went to church the other day, and Mads says, oh, well then you're not gonna like me either. You don't believe in two genders. So one person's prejudice then stays with Mads, and Mads becomes prejudiced towards us. And then we say, well, they're not very accepting of us. And you see how this just layers upon layers. And because Mads, and why I wanted Mads to be one of my culture brokers, says, okay, now I'm curious. When we have those experiences, the best thing we can do is be curious. Gee, how did, and actually I had somebody say this to me the other day, how can the two of you read the same book and one of you comes out with this idea of love and kindness and the other one that comes with the idea of building a wall between us? That's the conversation that we have to be able to have if we want to have that radical respect.
The other thing to know about being an ally is that it's uncomfortable and we are all going to make mistakes. We're human. I was an online admin for a social media group for a while, and in trying to get two people to be respectful with each other, they were going at it in the comments. I inadvertently silenced a person of color, which is the last thing that I ever want to do. Admitting that still brings up feelings of shame in me to this day. And I had to be willing to deal with that emotion as well as I could. It took a while, but to deal with it and to learn from it, because my discomfort was less important than learning how to be a better ally. And one of the tools that I want to offer for moments like this, because inevitably we're all going to fail, is this mindfulness practice for self-compassion. The idea is to notice what you're feeling, to allow it to happen, as Francis told me in a story, let it wash over you, and then when it's over, let it be over. When you're in a car stuck at a railroad crossing, it's annoying while the train is passing, but once it's gone, it's gone. And the most important thing that we can do is to let it pass and then learn from what happened. In my case, I did my best to apologize and to own the impact that I had and learn how to be a better admin. There's also something to be said for the power of validation. Folks who have gender dysphoria, when you call them by their proper name and their proper pronouns, you have the chance to possibly give them the gift of gender euphoria, which is a feeling of elation that can happen when you're recognized by someone else for who you are. This has happened to me a couple of times, and I have chills again just preparing to tell you about it. We were coming back from a vacation, my parents and I, we were on a plane, imagine that, in this time. And the stewardess came to get our drink orders. She talked to my mom, she talked to my dad. I was at the window. She comes to talk to me and goes, "And for you, sir, ma'am, sir." And I was ecstatic. I had never had someone second guess out loud like that. And it was so powerful. And this person has no way of knowing how happy they made me and how happy it still makes me to remember that interaction. Frances has an airplane story as well.
Yeah, mine didn't go as well. Or it's from the side of the ally. So, you know, you get in the airplane back in the day and we flew, and I get the middle seat. And this very tall person with long black hair, really colorful pants, clearly younger, sits in the window seat. And we start having this conversation. And at some point, I said something about her, and they turned around and looked at me, and he goes, "I'm a dude." And I'll never forget it. It was like, and there's something about, as soon as he said, "I'm a dude," all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, you are. It's so obvious. And again, what do? I made a mistake, and I said, "I'm so sorry. You know, let me reframe." It's like, okay, switch back. And so I had to laugh that when Mads was telling me that story, first off, my thought was, sir, ma'am, sir, that Mads was going to say they were offended. And so there was like a surprise ending there, that when we make the mistake, it can actually make people happy. But it also reminded me of when I didn't get it right. "I'm a dude" will stay in my head for the rest of my life.
And coming back to the piece that allyship is about action, we have some suggestions for how to take action if you want. I also really want to draw your attention to the resources packet, because you do have an organization in Eugene that is trans run. It's a nonprofit. I believe it's called Transponder, and it is local to you. So I would highly recommend their website. Information is in the packet. Some practical strategies while we have just a few more minutes. Frances, you did it. You didn't do it this whole time.
I didn't. I did not misgender Mads once. Did anybody hear me? I did not do it. I want the blue ribbon.
But imagining that she has restraint, what might she do?
So I'm talking about Mads, and I said, well, okay, now?
Yeah.
Okay, so you missed my whole hallelujah. I did not do a misgender once.
Oh, no.
Yeah. If anyone heard it, tell me, because we've been really, really careful today. But what would have happened, or what do you think I should do if I say, well, Mads, she, how do we do it? How do we come back? What's our recovery skill? Anybody want to just throw some into the chat room?
I also apologize. I went to the next piece too fast.
Oh, that's funny. Well, then, yeah, go ahead. Who said?
Judy.
Yeah.
Because this is, I'm glad you're getting to this, because we work with a lot of trans students and just all students. And I will say, I'll rephrase, I'll say, well, Mads, they, da-da-da. So just kind of go back and just emphasize if we know the pronoun. I just wanted to ask really quick with students. I just don't assume on anybody, no matter what they look like or what their name is. So I have been using they when I talk to a third party that says, the student, I try to use the name, but if I forget, my default is they. And I just want to make sure that that is appropriate, because that's how I've been respectful.
I think that's just, okay. Sorry, my computer is being sassy again. That's just fine. I personally think there are, of course, going to be people who try to insist that, what just happened? Oh, my computer's crashing. I'm so sorry. Resume share. Okay. I don't know what I touched. Okay. Short answer is yes. The next piece is,
Well, I do have a little bit of a thought on that, is that I'm thinking about Roxy, who works so hard to be a she.
Right.
So while they may feel safe, if we say they to Roxy, I think there may be a little bit of a different place. I guess two things. One is we could ask, or we could listen for cues. I think the other is just be prepared to, this person wants to be they, this person wants to be she. Sorry, if I can quickly just say, my example is, let's say that 3 of you are named Elizabeth, and one of you wants to be Beth, and one of you wants to be Lizzie, and one of you wants to be Elizabeth. Do we have to have a national conference and all of you have to agree? Absolutely not. We all have a different way that we identify ourselves. So I'm hanging out with Lizzie all day, and now I'm hanging out with Beth, and I can't accidentally call her Lizzie. First off, I hope that I can say, I'm sorry, I've been hanging out with Lizzie all day, and that Beth will say, I get it, it's Beth. If we could almost go too safe to where we don't say anything. So that'd be the other end of that discussion. Okay, so in real life, when I referred to Mads and Quill, 2 of you, as she, and then I said, I'm sorry, they, what do you think Mads should say? Well, Mads, just put it up.
I did, I went too fast.
That's okay. This
Good
is what
modeling.
that's what Mads said to me, which makes me feel better than, it makes me feel safe enough to know that I am going to make the mistake again. I have made it today in our practice, but it's safe enough for me to learn, not to feel like I have to get it right. It's also safe enough to me to know that Mads knows my soul and knows that it's not coming from a place of, this is the negative label I want to put on you.
So Frances, would you say that just making the effort to just use the name of the student, which it will be probably the best, and I'm talking academia, I'm talking and I'm talking even when the student is not there, which is harder because we don't assume pronouns. So you would say, stick to the name, first name, and that will convey a lot more respect than will everybody on board or not assuming pronouns.
I think so. I was talking to Mads about somebody earlier and I said, I'm not sure of their pronouns. I don't know. And it's somebody we want to invite into this conversation. I said, I know their name is Diane, but I don't know. I think I said, I know their name is Diane, but I don't know if she says they. So it explains that I don't know is probably to me the best place to land.
Can I address something?
Sure, go ahead, Christopher.
So in my line of work, obviously I run into a lot of FI, I run into a lot of people and I have to interview them. And I usually start out with either sir or ma'am, and I'm usually corrected with by saying that their pronoun, they'll tell me their pronouns, and at that point in time, I then use they or them, or his or her, or she or hers. I'd like to know if there's a better way that you suggest I should approach opening a conversation when I'm not sure about their pronouns.
Unfortunately, there is at this time not a good gender neutral version of what would substitute for sir or ma'am. In a service industry myself, that is also, it's just sticky. We don't have a word for that yet. In general, I think that that's just fine to either, you can continue opening with either sir or ma'am, or if you're comfortable, you could try, excuse me, would you prefer sir or ma'am, or to use your name? So it's whatever works best for you, but the deferring to when they tell you that sir or ma'am don't fit, I think that strategy is just fine.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It is definitely one of those places where I really wish that there was another accessible word, and hopefully we'll get one soon since language is alive, as we talked about. I want to touch really quickly on the concept that we have social scripts in our language. The quickest one to sort of demonstrate the concept is the how are you, I'm fine. I'm sorry elicits it's okay, and that is not actually useful for either party, as it turns out. With your permission, Frances, I'm going to summarize this to get us through it. The notion that it's not okay to expect a casual apology from someone that you have called the wrong word, but it also doesn't acknowledge how much work an ally is doing and the amount of effort that it takes to rescue them by just saying, oh, it's fine, or dismissing it. So Frances taught me that, and I'm very grateful for that. And we also have some other strategies that we can talk about.
Yeah,
Sorry, all these little technological things. Okay, so I did just, or is that in this one? The just a little bit more about pronouns in something that we talked about. Yeah, when I say I'm sorry and somebody says that's okay, what happens is that all that work I did just seems to go by the wayside. Of course it's not okay. And actually when I'm just thinking about when I said I mispronounced somebody, I said, I'm sorry, they, and the person said, that's okay. And I said, no, it's not. I have to learn this. And I could tell they felt validated. But again, just thinking about in all the different marginalized cultures that many of us are in, no, it's not okay. And thank you for learning. That's why good modeling is so important. The other example that I think is really important, new executive director of an organization comes in from another state, says, my pronoun is they. We're all working really hard to get they. This person and I become really close friends enough that they invite me to a party and I meet their wife. And wife refers to this person as she. And I went, okay, you just called them she, and I'm working really hard to call them they. The point I want to make is this. This person asked me to call them they. I don't get to decide. And if wife says she and they're okay with it, that doesn't mean that I get permission to do that. It is still, I call you what you want to be called, not what I think it should be or what would make me comfortable. So the other strategies, again, practice saying it when you're not present. And I'm sorry Phil's not here right now. He said he's coming back tomorrow. But when I first wanted to do this with Mads, and I presented this to Tracy and Greg and Phil, I introduced Mads as they. They had never met Mads, and yet they were all using the word they. And Mads complimented me and said, so even if you misgender me occasionally, what it tells me is you have modeled and introduced me into a room of people I don't even know with my right pronouns. And that made me feel good. I am doing something that is respectful to Mads in my learning curve. And I feel like this is part of that second one too, about when other people are misusing it, how do you do it in a way that they still feel respected, but also that they're helped to learn?
Yes, and modeling that for others is really powerful because it helps them to hear it and hopefully internalize it. There are also other resources. You can fill out a worksheet like the one that's in your packet. You can use an online tool or game. There's an example link to one there. And there are other resources out there. But we do want to close with a final story, Frances.
I love the fact that Mads even wanted this story included in here. And I also want to speak to Judy has been saying often in the chat room, what about when they're not in the room? Right. Allyship is not just me standing beside Mads. It's also being the voice of an ally when Mads is not even in the room. Maybe it has nothing to do with Mads, but there is a conversation and Mads is not there. Nobody is there except me. And so I wish that I could claim this story as my own, but this is my husband's story. My husband is, let me just give you a little visual. I was thinking we should probably have a picture of him. Bald-headed, white guy, straight, retired, maybe a little chubby in the tummy, plays golf with his other retired, same look guys every Tuesday and Thursday. That's my husband. Okay. On the same day, a couple years back, that it was said that trans people were no longer allowed to be in the services. It was the same day that it was handed down that DACA students would not be respected. And I said, I've got to do something. Well, I have this friend, Diane, and we have an agreement that whenever something happens, if I call her, she's going to show up. If she calls me, I'm going to show up. Francis, we don't have a lot of time to get together, but we're going to have a rally in front of City Hall opposing this trans new rule. I said to Jim, after church, I'm going there. And he looked at me, he goes, what makes you think I'm not going? So we go together, and he's holding up the signs, and he's screaming just as loud as I am. And remember, this happened on a Friday. This is Sunday. There's like 20 of us. Fast forward to Tuesday. He's with his golfing buddies. They're done golfing. They're sitting around having their beer. Can I say beer? They're having their beer. And this guy comes up and sits by him and he goes, saw you on TV. Jim goes, yes, you did. And he goes, so do you wear dresses sometimes? Jim takes a sip, he puts it down, and he says, there is injustice in this world. And whenever I see injustice, I will stand up, I will speak against it, and you will see me on television. He didn't get pulled into it. He just said, this is who I am. He didn't say my best friend. He didn't say anything. He said, this is who I am. And I love it. Colin just said, I love him. Yeah.
Yep,
Mad's comment was, he's a keeper. And I said, no kidding. But here's the kicker to the story. I don't think he's ever going to change anyone in his golf team who is embedded in that prejudice. But maybe the guy who asked him has a son or a daughter, has another family member, has somebody close to him who is going through this, or maybe it's this man himself is having questions. He may have helped him. Maybe he said, gosh, Jim speaks up, maybe I should. And the punchline to this story is the next week and subsequent weeks after that, this guy gets in, he goes, I'm riding in the car with Jim. Because Jim became an ally and in some ways a culture broker for this man. We have to be doing this all the time, whether people are in the room or not. This is ours as much as theirs. I just want to finish that connection story. I actually told that story in a workshop. Right after lunch, this guy comes up and he goes, I wasn't in the workshop, but my wife told me your story, and now I'm going to use that same tactic. So what your husband did just rippled all the way to Atlanta, and I'm taking that back to New York. That's how we do it.
And with that, we don't have a ton of time, but we do. Francis, you have another engagement at 2, correct?
I do.
Okay, so I am comfortable staying a little longer if anybody wants to stay and continue talking. I got my sound to work again, so I can hear you now. And thank you so much for having us.